Tradition is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. It gives us a sense of belonging, continuity, and stability. It connects us to our ancestors and reminds us of where we came from. For many people, tradition feels like a moral compass, a guide for how life should be lived. But sometimes, the power of tradition becomes its weakness. When tradition turns into unquestioned truth, it can quietly block progress and discourage independent thought. This is where the appeal to tradition fallacy comes in. It's the belief that something must be right, good, or true simply because it has always been done that way. People use it all the time, often without realizing it. You'll hear it in statements like "that's how it's always been," "it worked for generations," or "if it was good enough for our parents, it's good enough for us." These arguments sound convincing because they rely on something deeply emotional, our respect for the past. But tradition alone isn't a reason for something to be true or right. It's a description of what has been, not proof of what should be. The fact that an idea or practice has survived a long time doesn't make it correct, it only makes it familiar. Familiarity gives us comfort, and comfort makes us resistant to change. That's why this fallacy is so effective, it feels safe. It tells us that if we just stick to what's known, we'll be fine. Yet history is full of examples where what's always been done turned out to be harmful or irrational. There were times when certain people were denied rights simply because that's how society was structured. There were medical practices once considered sacred traditions that are now seen as dangerous or absurd. Many beliefs we take for granted today, like equality, democracy, or scientific inquiry, only became accepted because someone dared to question tradition. The danger of the appeal to tradition is that it shuts down inquiry. It replaces reasoning with repetition. Instead of asking, "Does this idea still serve us?" we say, "We've always done it, so it must be right." The difference is subtle but powerful. When we stop examining our traditions, we risk keeping things not because they are wise, but because they are old. Of course, not all traditions are bad. Some carry genuine value, kindness, community, storytelling, respect, and cooperation. These are traditions worth preserving not because they're ancient, but because they continue to make sense. The key is not to reject tradition, but to understand it. We should ask whether a tradition still holds meaning or whether it has become a habit that prevents us from growing. The emotional pull of tradition is strong. It's tied to family, religion, and identity. To challenge a tradition can feel like betraying the people who came before us. That's why it's so hard to break from inherited ways of thinking. But questioning tradition doesn't mean disrespecting it. It means honoring it enough to examine whether it still aligns with truth, fairness, and progress. It helps to remember that every tradition was once a new idea. Someone, somewhere, started it. Every old way began as a change from something older. If we freeze time in the name of preserving tradition, we deny future generations the same creative freedom that our ancestors once had. Progress happens when people respect the past but are not trapped by it. In everyday life, appeal to tradition shows up in subtle ways. A company resists new technology because this is how we've always done business. A family sticks to harmful roles or expectations because that's just how things are. A society refuses reform because it worked before. These arguments avoid addressing whether the current method is still effective, they just appeal to comfort and history. What makes the appeal to tradition tricky is that it often comes from a good place. People aren't usually trying to manipulate, they're trying to preserve meaning. But preservation without reflection leads to stagnation. The goal isn't to abandon our roots, but to make sure they're still feeding something alive. We can respect tradition while also recognizing that change is not the enemy. When we question what we've inherited, we're not discarding wisdom, we're filtering it. We're asking, what still serves us, and what doesn't? That's how societies evolve, not through rebellion for its own sake, but through thoughtful revision of what we've been given. Appeal to tradition becomes dangerous when it's used to end discussion instead of starting one. When someone says, "We've always done it this way," that's not a conclusion, it's an invitation to ask, why? Because the truth is, nothing lasts forever just because it's old. It lasts because it continues to hold meaning. Tradition should guide us, not control us. It should help us navigate change, not fear it. The past deserves respect, but it shouldn't decide the future. When we stop confusing longevity with truth, we begin to see that wisdom isn't about preserving everything, it's about knowing what to let go of and what to carry forward.